Hello everybody, Tom Sykes, aka the Royalist here. It is Monday the 3rd of November and I have been asked all weekend, people have been asking me what Harry and Meghan make of the Andrew scandal, of the Andrew debacle, of the Andrew defenestration. Do they think that it affects their chances of hanging on to their titles and their HRHs when King William ascends the throne? As my readers will know, I've been reporting for a couple of months now that they are probably going to lose their titles along with Archie and Lilibet when William ascends the throne. He's not particularly keen on having Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet waiting in the wings. I actually, though, have got some interesting information from some friends of Harry saying that he completely supports his father's decision, saying that he loathes Andrew more than anybody else in the family, that Harry is has long been one of Andrew's most principal and vocal opponents within the family, that Harry is very concerned about Beatrice and Eugenie, who he's very close to, and doesn't want to do anything to hurt them, I'm told. That he's definitely not going to be making any public statement about it. He doesn't want to get drawn into it. He has left the institution. It's not for him to be commenting on how the institution, as he always calls the royal family, how they want to deal with Andrew. Interestingly, I'm also hearing that there is serious concern about Andrew's mental health from Harry's side, from Harry's camp. And I think that is coming through increasingly as a theme, that people are saying that Andrew is not coping well, that this could end badly, these kinds of things. Those are all things that are coming through in terms of how they are feeling about the whole situation. Obviously, their side and their friends won't be drawn on whether or not they think this affects them keeping their titles. I mean, their opinion is, their view is that the letters patent issued in 1917, get my dates right there, the letters patent issued by George V still apply, and that their children are by birthright prince and princess. As we heard Meghan say very clearly in her Oprah interview, that is their birthright and no one should take it away from them. And maybe let's not talk too much about the fact that at the time of their birth, there was quite a lot of briefing from their camp then that they weren't going to use these terribly outdated titles. But, you know, things change, people change their minds, kids change everything. Fair, whatever. So it is very interesting that they seem to be very keen to align themselves with the decision of the institution, the decision of the family. I mean, of course, in one sense, the whole world is basically behind this decision, so no one's going to be striking out against it. But I feel that if you look at Harry's book, Spare, I do think that he was one of the first people to say that, to speak up again. He was definitely one of the first people in the family to speak up against Andrew. So in his book, which Spare published in not long after the Queen died, so 2023, January 2023, he says, Meghan asked me one night, you don't think they'd ever pull our security, do you? And he replies, never, not in this climate of hate, and not after what happened to my mother. Also, not in the wake of my uncle Andrew. He was embroiled in a shameful sex scandal, accused of the sexual assault of a young woman, and no one had so much as suggested that he lose his security. Whatever grievances people had against us, sex crimes weren't on the list. Now, that is a very interesting line from Harry, especially when you consider when it was written. So I think it's fair to say that Harry was a long way ahead of the institution in writing this and in saying that the way that Andrew was behaving, you know, was completely unacceptable, to put it mildly. So I think just unpicking this a bit and working through it a bit, the thing that I think really bothers Harry and Meghan, particularly about the Andrew scandal, is that Andrew has been accused of these terrible crimes that have, ultimately, what one assumes contributed to the suicide of Virginia Giuffre, and the whole Epstein connection. And yet, Andrew still seemed to remain within the circle of trust of the royal family. He was still being invited to Sandringham. He was still being given his security. And you will remember that security is the big, big issue for Harry. He said that it's the issue that's bigger than everything else. It's the thing that he went to court for. It's the thing that really he blew up his relationship with his father for. So it's very interesting. The impression that I get is that they're saying, yeah, of course he supports what the king did, but he had said that in 2020, i.e. he was ahead of the king, liberated from not being in the institution, liberated from not having to toe the line, as it were. Now, I'm not saying this makes Harry some great humanitarian hero or anything like that, but I am saying that it is interesting that he was prepared to put pen to paper in 2023, 2.5 years ago, and publish a thing basically denouncing Andrew. And I think it is worth recognizing that that makes him the first member of the royal family to actively and publicly do that. Now, where does that's all in the past. Where does that leave us today? Well, I think Harry and Meghan are now in a very awkward situation. I think it's quite clear that their titles will be taken away and that their children's titles will be taken away, because what has changed today, Monday, the 3rd of November, compared to Thursday, October the 28th, I hope I'm getting my dates right there. Anyway, what has changed from 2 minutes before that announcement that King Charles made was that prior to that announcement, we were assured and we were told that there was no way that a prince title could be removed. There was no way that a Duke of York or a Duke of Sussex type title could be removed. After 7 o'clock on Thursday, it is clear that the world has changed. And even if you don't think Charles did enough, even if you don't think that Andrew should be prosecuted and thrown in jail and all those things, which in other videos and writings I've explained why that's not really possible due to his brother being the head of state. Even if you think all of those things, what is absolutely true is that it has now been proved beyond doubt that it is possible to remove a title and a princely title and an HRH and a dukedom formally from an individual. Well, that changes everything. If you can remove these titles, then the question becomes, why do certain people keep them and why should certain people not keep them? And that is a profound dilemma for Harry and Meghan, because it suggests that should William now want to, which I have always said, and I have long said, this is an HRH or a prince. These are effectively executive orders. They're called something called letters patent, which is a posh way of saying, a posh, not medieval, Victorian, Edwardian way of saying an executive order. That's the easiest way to think about it. The king can declare via letters patent, which is what is happening now, that Andrew is no longer a prince. And that's it. It's done. It's done. It's entirely within his gift. So that is a huge shift in what is now possible and what is not possible. And it does increase pressure on Harry, and it increases the risk that their titles will be taken away. So the short answer to those people who've been asking me over the weekend, how does this impact Harry and Meghan and how does it impact their titles, is that I think it proves what I've been saying all along, which is what my sources in William's camp have been saying to me all along, which is that he does intend to have a clean sweep of removing these titles. Now, the other thing that I think is really interesting is that I think that Beatrice and Eugenie have been specifically guaranteed that they will keep their titles. And I would imagine that it's very hard to imagine that this wasn't done with William's consent, i.e. William will have consented to this. And I think that is part of the price of getting Andrew out of Royal Lodge. We all know how important status and deference and respect has always been to Andrew. And if he can't have it, well, at least his kids can have it. So I think that is a very interesting part of the whole equation of what's happening. In a way, I feel that the royal world, has shifted on its axis in the past few days. It shifted on its axis, let's be frank, on Thursday night, because on Thursday night, a whole load of things that had always been told we were completely impossible suddenly not only became possible, they were done. And of course, that's how change happens often in the royal family. It happens very, very slowly, and then it happens all of a sudden, and a big dramatic move is made. I think the other really interesting thing that I think tells you that Harry and Meghan are aware of where this narrative ends when we have King Billy on the throne is the fact that they have been making a big deal out of the Sussex surname, and that they are using that as their surname. And it's actually, if you think about it, it's actually a clever tactical move to ensure that their identity as royals survives any kind of Andrew-style defenestration, right? Because you can call yourself whatever you want. You can change your birth certificate. You can make your name, whether Harry's name is Mountbatten Windsor on his birth certificate or whatever, Prince Harry or whatever it is, and the prince thing is removed, and they're told that they are no longer prince and she is actually Princess Harry, Meghan, that is actually one of her official titles. But if they're Sussex, like we all know that Sussex is part of the royal title that they were given. So, and often, of course, in British culture, you would refer to somebody informally by their title. For example, the Lord Lieutenant, not the Lord Lieutenant, the chap in charge of organising the King's funeral is actually called Eddie Howard, but he's often referred to as Eddie Norfolk because he is the Duke of Norfolk. So, in fact, by Meghan saying we're all going to be known as Sussex from now on, I think it's a very clever piece of future-proofing that if the Prince and Princess titles are taken away, if the HRHs are fully removed rather than just being placed in abeyance, and we know that Meghan has been using those HRH titles in contravention of what was agreed with Queen Elizabeth II at the Sandringham Summit, and her side have tried to spin it as well. They only agreed not to use it for commercial purposes, but actually the Queen just said they will not use them. There was no distinction between it being private and personal. And that's a public statement, which you can look up on the Queen's website, if you so please. And in fact, my producer may even have brought it up on the screen for you to see. The proof is in the pudding. You can see there that the Queen just says they will not use the HRH. That there was never any distinction between using it privately or using it personally. That was never, ever part of the distinction. And it is a little disingenuous of Meghan to try and subsequently claim that when she was caught having printed up compliment slips for herself and also reportedly for her children, identifying them as HRH on the sort of with compliments on the printed slips that she sent out to her friends and to her business acquaintances. So I think that the Sussex thing is definitely a part of this. It's a tactical move to get ahead of what may be coming. But I think that the fact that Harry wants to align himself with the family, with his father on this is not, of course, entirely surprising, because that is a logical and sensible position to take, and pretty well the whole world agrees with it. The more intriguing thing that I have been told about all this is that there is a warming up of relations between Harry and his father. I have been told that Harry is now speaking to his father regularly. I'm told that the contents of the discussion I can't get any information on at all, I'm afraid. I think they've once bitten, twice shy about that, that they're not saying what is actually being discussed. But I get the impression that it's low level family personal stuff. It's not policy, it's not about his security, it's not about the grievances, it's not about those kinds of things. It's about trying to re-establish a normal, friendly father-son relationship. Now, I personally think that Charles is misguided to do this. I note that Charles's side have not been so keen to let me know whether or not they are speaking regularly with Harry. And I think that this is going to anger William significantly, because William understands, I think, William grasps the fact that a king needs to be strong, a king needs to be firm, a king needs to be authoritative, and that a king's job is not really to be nice and to be compassionate. And I was talking earlier about the comparison between Henry II. Henry II was an absolutely kick-ass medieval king. You know, he didn't take any nonsense from anyone. He crushed insubordination with a hand of steel. And do you know what? Like, his authority produced really the best thing that you could hope for in a medieval monarchy system where life wasn't particularly wonderful for normal people. But the only thing they could really hope for was order and stability. And he produced order and stability. His son, King John, was famously incredibly indecisive, was manipulated. He provoked rebellion. He was forced into signing the Magna Carta, which, you know, now, of course, a wonderful thing that the people got control. But he was forced into it, not because of his principle, but because of his weakness. The key point is that kings have to be tough. They have to be absolutely brutal. And in the old days, if you had done what Harry had been done, you simply would have had your head cut off. I mean, that is the reality of it. Or you certainly would have been exiled and never spoken again to a rocky outcrop. And I think that William totally understands this, but Charles seems to be very indulgent towards Harry. I have to say, I think it's a mistake. I understand it from a personal view. I understand it very much from the position that the king is dying, and that he, as Harry himself has said, we don't know how long he has left. It could well be many years. You know, he is getting the best treatment in the world, and it could be many, many years, but it might not be so long. And I think that Charles wants to see his grandchildren as a normal human being would want to. But I think that he is misreading that. He thinks that this would be a good sort of PR decision to see his grandchildren. That'll make him look like a convener. Archie and Lily, of course, this is what I'm talking about, his Californian grandchildren, that it'll make him look like this convener, this healer, this bringer together. And I just think the thing is, we've seen how badly that went with Prince Andrew. And I just don't know that he is reading the room correctly in terms of his domestic audience, which is what really matters to the king, is how they are perceived domestically. So I think that there is a danger here. Of course, Harry wants to do the right thing. Of course, he wants to align himself with the forces that are against Andrew. Of course, he wants to have regular conversations with his father. I'm just not convinced that that is of as much benefit to Charles as Charles perhaps thinks it is. And I think that fundamentally you have to remember what Harry said about his father and what he said about Queen Camilla, not only in his book, but also famously in the Anderson Cooper interview, when he said that Camilla was prepared to leave bodies in the street in her desire to be queen, which is frankly an unforgivable thing to say. I'll correct myself there. It's not an unforgivable thing to say in the heat of an argument. We've all had arguments with our parents, with our kids, with our siblings, where we've said terrible things, but it's an absolutely appalling thing to say on television to a public audience. And it was clearly designed to damage and upset Camilla. And I think it's also pretty clear that Harry did brief Omid Scobie as to the identity of who were the so-called royal racists that were King Charles and Kate, and it mysteriously appeared, well, certainly his camp did, not necessarily Harry himself, and their identities mysteriously appeared. And I think that is what William cannot get over. And that is why what happened on Thursday has huge consequences for what William will do when he becomes king. I think, though, however, I think that it's fair to say that Prince Harry probably will be irked by the fact that Andrew is still keeping his police security. As you will recall, no doubt, as we all recall, this has been the key ask of Harry over the years. He has said that it's the most important matter of all, the most important thing of all, the thing that I think it's fairly clear now he was ready to blow up his relationship with his father for, if that's what it took. And he came pretty close to doing that. What I'm told is that Harry fundamentally supports Andrew's right to have security because he believes that it is a human right for a person to be safe. And whether or not you are liked or loathed is not the issue. The issue is, were you born into a position where you don't have any choice, that you've become a targeted person and you are at risk? And obviously these days you only have to look on social media and see the threats against Andrew or Harry or Meghan or indeed anybody. But I think there is an issue here, because you only have to look at X to see the threats against anybody anywhere in the world. Like if you want to dig into the comments on social media, you're pretty soon going to find someone saying they want to kill you, if you have any kind of public profile at all. So I think that it is still safe to say that Harry finds it odd that Andrew has police protection and he doesn't. And of course, what Harry has always argued is that via the complexities of the RAVEC body, which is the body that organizes royal protection, it's been manipulated in a way to prevent him having this thing called a risk analysis. And if he was given the risk management board analysis, that would clearly show that he was entitled to the security. But what they kind of suggest is that the royal representative on the board, which is Clive Alderton, who is Charles's private secretary, aka the WASP, etc., what they suggest is that he's kind of manipulated it so that Harry doesn't kind of get onto the first step, which is the kind of launch pad to the proper security. Now, of course, the reality is, as I have long explained to anybody who cares to listen, this is fundamentally a political decision not to give Harry security, and it's about controlling and limiting his movements. And I've been told this very clearly by friends of Harry over the years, that Harry believes it's about control and management of him, because the fact of the matter is that if Harry did have a right to automatic security, he and Meghan could Now we've got, this is a very good example. We have Remembrance Day coming up, right? Sunday, biggest day of the year. Oh, and by the way, very excitingly, I can tell you that I am going to be doing a live with Plum Sykes, my beloved sister, on Sunday morning. We're going to be covering the Remembrance Day fashion, and exactly, well, fashion might be the wrong word to use in that context, but the Remembrance Day, how the aesthetics, that's the word I'm looking for. We're going to be covering the Remembrance Day aesthetics with Plum Sykes. So I'm very excited. So that will probably start about 10:30 a.m. UK time, which is only 5:30 in New York. So I don't think you've really got any excuses not to be there. And at 2:30 in California, I mean, I know how early you Californians get up. I mean, 2:30 a.m. That's just a bit of an early start, but you know, I think it'll be worth it. But the point is that this Remembrance Day, right? And Remembrance Day, I guarantee you something will happen in the next few days where Harry will post something on social media that'll, you know, refer to his military service and allude gently to the fact that, you know, or will encourage people like me to allude gently to the fact that he is one of the very few members of the British royal family. In fact, along with Prince Andrew, he's the only living member of the royal family to have seen active service. And yet both of these men are not allowed to participate in the official Royal Remembrance Sunday service and celebrations. So it's a really fraught day for the royal family. It's the most important day in the calendar ceremonially, I would argue, perhaps after Trooping the Colour, but arguably in another way even more important than Trooping of the Colour, because the royal family derives so much of its legitimacy from its role within and commanding the military. But what they don't like is to be, you know, this famous royal word, distractions. What they don't like is distractions. So when you see Kate and William and Charles and Camilla at the cenotaph on Sunday, which is the UK amazing war memorial in central London, and it's it's incredibly moving, as it is all over the world, as we remember those incredible people who gave their lives, you know, in all those conflicts. And it's a really, really, really important day. The nightmare scenario for the royal family, if Harry has security, if he has that automatic security, he can arrive at Heathrow Airport and he can just say, I'm here, I've touched down, and the police are legally obligated to turn up and provide him a police escort to wherever he wants to go. So he could go and do an event with Invictus. He could go and show up at a small country memorial service. He could go to one of his old squadrons. He could go to a British Legion club. He could do whatever he wanted, right? But because he doesn't have security, he has to give 28 days notice when he's coming to the United Kingdom, so they know when he's coming and they can control it, and they remain in control. And that is the thing that, you know, of course Harry knows that. Of course Harry's peoples know that. They deny it and they said it's not about this. It's about a moral issue of whether you should have security if you're born into risk. And they say that, you know, they say that in the case of Andrew, what their argument is it doesn't make any difference whether you're a pleasant person or an unpleasant person. Under the Human Rights Act, you are entitled to police protection if there is a real and immediate risk to your life. So I get the impression that it sticks in the craw of Harry that Prince, as he says in his book, So, you know, Meg asked me, and we're back to where we started. Meg asked me one night, you don't think they'd ever pull off security, do you? Never, not in this climate of hate, and not after what happened to my mother. Also, not in the wake of my Uncle Andrew. He was embroiled in a shameful scandal, accused of the sexual assault of a young woman, and no one had so much as suggested that he lose his security. Whatever grievances people had against us, sex crimes weren't on the list. So I think that makes it pretty clear how Harry will likely feel about Andrew keeping his security despite everything that's happened. I hope that's cleared up roughly what I think about, and roughly what I'm being told about the relationship between Harry and Charles, that Harry is in regular phone contact with him, that he does support the decisions that have been made, over Andrew. So that's more or less it for today. It's going to be a really interesting week this week ahead. This is reset week, right? This is like Prince Andrew's in the past. Let's all move forward to the future. We've got William in Rio doing the Earthshot Prize, a brilliant initiative, really, I think, to leverage his fame to raise all this money and £1 million to 5 different ideas to scale up. We're in year 5 of it. It's going to go on for 10 years. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of ideas. That's a lot of people being given encouragement. £1 million is not nothing. It's enough to get your idea going to the next level. One of the projects is really cool. So it's microplastics, right, are a big issue. And one of the projects is just so simple. It's just like a filter that goes in your washing machine and traps all the microplastics that are on your clothes from going out into the, why on earth that washing machines can't just have a little filter to catch microplastics? I mean, it makes sense, and I think that the royal family, a lot of the others, there's all this controversy and all of this, but I think what William grasps is that they own and are respected on this issue of the environment. I was really impressed to see that they were briefing that Harry had shared his speech for COP30 with the King, and I thought it was all very cleverly done indeed. And I very much hope that the whole Earthshot thing is a big success, and let's hope that it is. And well done, William. It's a great initiative. So with that, I'm going to shut up and see you all later in the week, tomorrow, later today, whenever. Bye.